Hi, I'm Emma. I'm a 28-year-old graphic designer living in Portland, and for the past 22 years, I thought I had found my forever family. But that Tuesday evening in March, sitting around my parents' dining table with the smell of Mom's famous pot roast filling the air, my sister Sarah said something that shattered everything I believed about belonging. Emma can't come to the wedding, Sarah announced, not even looking up from her phone as she scrolled through what I assumed was her endless wedding planning Pinterest boards. She's not really family anyway. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually felt my chest tighten like someone had just punched all the air out of my lungs. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Dad's hand froze halfway to his mouth, a piece of pot roast dangling from his fork like he'd forgotten how to eat. "What did you just say?" I managed to whisper, though part of me hoped I'd misheard. Maybe she said something about seating arrangements or dress codes. Maybe my brain had just twisted her words into this nightmare. Sarah finally looked up, her blue eyes, the same shade as our parents', the shade I'd never share, meeting mine with a coldness I'd never seen before. "You heard me. This is my wedding, Emma, my day. And I want it to be just family, real family." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. I looked at Mom, waiting for her to say something, anything, to defend me, to remind Sarah that I was adopted when I was 6 years old, that they'd promised me I'd always be their daughter, that blood doesn't make a family. But Mom just stared at her plate like it held the secrets of the universe. "Dad?" My voice cracked on the single word. Dad cleared his throat, the way he always did when he was uncomfortable. "Well, sweetheart, you have to understand. Sarah's been planning this wedding for 2 years. It's a very special day for her. Special day. Have you ever felt like the ground just opened up beneath your feet? Like everything solid in your world suddenly turned to quicksand? That's exactly how I felt sitting there, watching the two people who raised me, who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework and celebrated every birthday for 22 years, choose my sister over me without even a moment's hesitation. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice getting stronger even as my heart was breaking. 22 years of being your daughter, and I'm just not invited to my own sister's wedding because I don't share your DNA? Sarah rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh God, here we go with the adopted child trauma drama. Emma, you're being ridiculous. It's not about DNA, it's about authenticity, about keeping things real and meaningful." Authenticity. She actually used the word authenticity to exclude me from the most important day of her life. I wanted to laugh, but I was afraid if I started, I might never stop. Or worse, I might start crying, and then Sarah would really have ammunition to call me dramatic. "Besides," Sarah continued, cutting another piece of pot roast with surgical precision, "the venue has limited capacity. We had to make tough choices. Uncle Mike's whole family is coming, and Brad's college fraternity brothers, and honestly, Emma, you barely know any of our friends anyway." Our friends, not her friends. Our friends. As if I was some stranger who'd wandered into their lives last week instead of someone who'd grown up with Sarah, who'd braided her hair for school pictures and helped her sneak out to meet boys when we were teenagers. Mom finally spoke up, but not in the way I'd hoped. "Emma, honey, you have to understand. Planning a wedding is so stressful. Sarah's been under so much pressure. Maybe we could do something special for you that weekend instead? Just the three of us?" Just the three of us. Not the four of us. Not the family. The three of them, plus me as some kind of consolation prize. I pushed my chair back from the table, the scraping sound loud in the tense silence. "You know what? I think I lost my appetite." As I walked toward the front door, I heard Dad call after me. "Emma, don't be dramatic about this. Sarah doesn't mean anything personal by it." I turned around one last time, looking at these three people who I'd called family for more than 2 decades. "How is excluding your daughter from your wedding not personal, Dad?" But he just shook his head, like I was the one being unreasonable, like I was the problem. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I got to my apartment, I went straight to my jewelry box and pulled out the bracelet they'd given me on my first day with them. It was a simple silver chain with small letter beads spelling out Emma. My new name for my new life. Mom had put it on my 6-year-old wrist and said, This is so you never forget that you're our daughter now. Forever and always, baby girl. Forever and always. I sat on my bed holding that bracelet, remembering how safe those words had made me feel, how they'd wrapped around me like armor against a world that had already taught me that people leave, that love is conditional, that family is just a word adults use until they don't want to anymore. But here I was, 22 years later, and apparently forever and always had an expiration date. The next few days passed in a blur of awkward family group texts that suddenly went silent whenever I contributed anything, and phone calls that didn't come. Sarah posted endless wedding updates on Instagram, photos of her dress fitting, her bachelorette party planning, her flower arrangements, and I realized I wasn't tagged in any of them. Not one. It was like I was being systematically erased from the family narrative, like they were editing me out of their story in real time. The worst part wasn't even the wedding exclusion itself, it was the gaslighting that followed. When I called Mom 3 days later, trying to have a rational conversation about how hurt I was, she sighed like I was exhausting her. Emma, sweetheart, I think you're overreacting. Sarah was probably just stressed when she said that. You know how she gets before big events. Mom, she said I'm not real family. How is that stress talking? Well, you have to admit, honey, you can be a little sensitive about the adoption thing. Maybe you misunderstood what she meant. A little sensitive about the adoption thing. As if being abandoned by my birth parents and then excluded by my adoptive family was just a character flaw I needed to work on. I didn't misunderstand anything, Mom. She said I couldn't come because I'm not really family. Dad agreed with her. You said nothing. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Mom said the words that would haunt me for weeks. Emma, we love you. You know we love you. But Sarah is going through a lot right now, and sometimes we have to prioritize the child who needs us most. The child who needs you most. After everything I'd done for this family, after all the ways I'd tried to earn my place, I was still just the backup child. The one they loved when it was convenient, when it didn't conflict with their real daughter's needs. I started paying attention to things I'd never noticed before, like how all the family photos in their living room were arranged chronologically, and you could see the exact moment I appeared in their lives. The professional family portraits before me showed this perfect nuclear family of 3. Then suddenly there were 4 people in the pictures, but somehow I was always positioned slightly apart, like an addition rather than an integral part. I noticed how Sarah had never, not once in 22 years, introduced me as her sister. It was always my parents' adopted daughter, or Emma who lives with us. Even our mutual friends from high school had picked up on this. Jessica Martinez, who I'd stayed close with, mentioned it when we met for coffee. You know, Em, I always thought it was weird how Sarah talked about you. Like, my brother drives me crazy, but he's still my brother, you know? Sarah always made it sound like you were more like a really long-term house guest. A really long-term house guest. That's exactly what I'd been, wasn't it? Someone they'd taken in out of kindness, but who never quite earned the right to permanent residency in their hearts. The family group chat, which used to be full of daily updates and inside jokes, became a minefield. Every message about wedding preparations felt like a deliberate exclusion. Photos of dress shopping trips I wasn't invited to. Updates about venue visits I wasn't included in. Even discussions about the rehearsal dinner, which apparently I also wouldn't be attending. When I finally worked up the courage to address it directly in the group chat, asking if we could talk about the wedding situation, the response was swift and brutal in its dismissiveness. Dad texted back, Emma, we've already discussed this. Let's not rehash old conversations. Sarah's response was worse. Some things are just for immediate family. I hope you can understand and be happy for me anyway. Immediate family. After 22 years, I was still not immediate family, but it was Mom's response that broke something inside me. Let's all try to be supportive of Sarah during this special time. There will be other celebrations we can all enjoy together. Other celebrations. Like I was supposed to just wait on the sidelines until they decided I was worthy of inclusion again. That night, I sat in my apartment looking through old photo albums, trying to understand when I'd become disposable to them. There were pictures of family vacations where I looked genuinely happy, thinking I belonged. Christmas mornings where I was surrounded by presents and love, believing I was home. Birthday parties where they'd celebrated me like I mattered. But looking at those photos now, I could see something I'd missed before. In almost every picture, there was a subtle distance. Sarah and our parents formed a natural triangle, and I was always just outside it, included but not integrated. The guest star in their family show, not a main character. I pulled out my laptop and started doing something I'd never done before. I started documenting. Screenshots of the group chat messages, photos of the family pictures that told the story of my gradual marginalization. Bank statements showing all the ways I'd tried to buy my place in their hearts. Because sitting there in the dark, holding that silver bracelet with my name on it, I realized something crucial. I had been funding my own exclusion for years, and it was time to stop. The thing about being adopted is that you spend your whole life trying to prove you're worth keeping. You become hyper-aware of every way you might be a burden, every reason someone might decide you're too much trouble. You learn to make yourself indispensable, to be the perfect daughter, the helpful sister, the grateful child who never asks for too much. And somewhere along the way, I'd become the family ATM, the one who could always be counted on to cover the extra expenses, to help out when money was tight, to contribute without question because I was just so grateful to belong somewhere. But gratitude, I was learning, has an expiration date. And mine had just run out. That silver bracelet became my talisman over the next 2 weeks, a reminder of broken promises and conditional love. But it also became something else, motivation to uncover the truth I'd been too blind to see. If I wasn't really family, then maybe it was time to understand exactly what kind of relationship we actually had. I started with my bank statements. Sitting at my kitchen table with 3 years' worth of financial records spread out like evidence at a crime scene, I began connecting dots I'd deliberately ignored. The pattern was so clear it made me nauseous. Every time Sarah had a crisis, every time mom and dad had an unexpected expense, every time the family needed something extra, there was a corresponding withdrawal from my account. Sarah's college tuition. I'd covered the last 2 years when dad's business hit a rough patch. $45,000, paid in careful installments so Sarah could graduate debt-free. I told myself it was an investment in family harmony, that helping my sister succeed was what good sisters do. The down payment on Sarah's townhouse. Sarah's $30,000 I'd loaned her 18 months ago, with vague promises about paying me back when things stabilize. The loan agreement we'd discussed never materialized, and every time I brought it up, Sarah would get defensive about how hard it was being a young professional in today's economy. Family vacations that I'd funded because Emma makes good money and doesn't have kids to worry about. The Cabo trip for mom and dad's anniversary. The weekend in Napa for Sarah's birthday. The ski lodge rental for Christmas. $15,000 in family experiences that I'd paid for while being reminded how lucky I was to be included. Then there were the smaller things that added up. Sarah's car repairs when she was between jobs, mom's emergency dental work that insurance didn't cover, dad's tools when his workshop was broken into, death by 1,000 cuts, each one justified as family helping family. The total was staggering, nearly $90,000 over 3 years. $90,000 to maintain my place in a family that had just uninvited me from the most important celebration in my sister's life. I was staring at the evidence of my own desperation, quantified in dollars and cents. Every payment was a plea. Please love me. Please keep me. Please let me belong. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. BTW, the caterer needs final headcount by Friday. Are you going to be difficult about the wedding thing, or can we move past this? Move past this. Like my exclusion was just a minor hiccup in wedding planning, not a fundamental rejection of my place in the family. I screenshot the message and added it to a folder on my laptop titled Evidence. Then I did something I'd never done before. I ignored Sarah's text completely. Instead, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Mrs. Rodriguez, my high school guidance counselor. She'd been more than just a counselor. She'd been the one adult who seemed to see me clearly, who understood the unique pressures of being an adopted kid trying to fit in. Emma Martinez. Her voice was warm with genuine pleasure. What a wonderful surprise. How are you, Mia? We caught up for a few minutes, and then I gathered my courage. Mrs. Rodriguez, I need to ask you something kind of personal. Do you remember my family? From parent-teacher conferences and graduation? Of course I remember them. Your parents were always so proud of you. Always talking about how smart you were, how responsible. What about Sarah? Do you remember her? There was a pause, the kind that speaks volumes. Sarah was different. Why do you ask? I took a deep breath and told her everything. The wedding exclusion, the years of financial manipulation, the constant feeling of being on probation in my own family. Mrs. Rodriguez listened without interrupting, making small, encouraging sounds that reminded me why I'd always felt safe talking to her. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that changed everything. Emma, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but given what you're going through, your parents used to brag about you constantly. They'd say things like, Emma's more responsible than our biological daughter, and we got so lucky with Emma, she's everything we hoped for in a child. They were genuinely proud of the person you became. My hand tightened on the phone. They said that? Multiple times, but Sarah. Another pause. Sarah knew. She was in my office more than once, upset about how much attention you were getting. She felt like she had to compete with you for her parents' affection. She actually said once that she wished they'd never adopted you because she felt like the spare child in her own family. The irony was breathtaking. While I'd spent 22 years feeling like an imposter, Sarah had felt displaced by my presence. We'd both been fighting for the same parents' love, but from opposite directions. There's something else, Mrs. Rodriguez continued carefully. Sarah came to see me about a month before graduation. She was angry about your college scholarships, about how you were getting recognition she felt she deserved. She said something that stuck with me because it was so cold. She said she couldn't wait to have her family back without having to share them with the adopted girl. The adopted girl. Even then, even in high school, I'd never been Emma to her. I'd always been the adopted girl, the outsider, the competition for resources and affection. Why didn't you tell me this before? I asked. Because you were thriving, Mija. You were confident and successful and seemed so happy. I didn't want to poison that with someone else's jealousy. But now I think you need to know that the problem was never you. You were never lacking anything. You were never not enough. After I hung up, I sat in my car crying for 20 minutes. Not just from sadness, but from relief. For the first time in my life, the puzzle pieces were fitting together in a way that made sense. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't oversensitive. I wasn't imagining the undercurrent of conditional acceptance that had colored every family interaction. I was the victim of a decades-long gaslighting campaign designed to keep me grateful and compliant. But Mrs. Rodriguez wasn't the only person with pieces of this puzzle. That evening, I reached out to Kevin Chen, Sarah's ex-boyfriend from college. They'd dated for 2 years, and he'd been around our family enough to see the dynamics I'd been too close to recognize. Kevin agreed to meet me for coffee, though he seemed nervous about it. We'd always gotten along well, but I could tell he was uncertain about getting involved in family drama. I wasn't sure I should tell you this, he said, after I explained why I'd called. But when Sarah and I broke up, she said some things that really bothered me. What kind of things? Kevin stirred his coffee nervously. She was angry at your parents for taking your side in some argument you two had. I don't even remember what it was about, but she went off about how they always protected you because you were adopted and they felt guilty. She said she was tired of being the afterthought in her own family. That's ironic, considering I've felt like the afterthought my entire life. That's just it, Emma. You weren't. At least not from what I could see. Your parents talked about you all the time. Your achievements, your kindness, your work ethic. Sarah hated it. She used to say that everything came easy to you because you were grateful for scraps, while she had to fight for attention she deserved by birthright. Kevin leaned forward, his expression serious. There's something else. Sarah used to talk about what would happen when she got married. She'd say things like, Finally, I can have my family back, and I can't wait to not have to pretend Emma belongs at family events anymore. I thought she was just venting, but now she's actually doing it. Emma, I need you to know something. The way Sarah talked about you was never okay. Even when we were dating, it made me uncomfortable. She'd refer to you as my parents' charity case or the grateful adopted daughter who doesn't know her place. I should have said something then, but I was young and stupid and didn't want to cause problems. I felt like I was collecting pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that revealed a picture I'd never wanted to see, but I needed to see it all. Do you remember anything specific? Anything that might help me understand how long this has been going on? Kevin pulled out his phone and scrolled through with old messages. Actually, yeah. I screenshot some texts from Sarah because they were so mean they shocked me. I probably should have deleted them years ago, but he handed me his phone. The messages were from 3 years ago, right around the time I'd started my current job and gotten my first big promotion. Emma got another promotion. Mom and Dad are acting like she cured cancer. I'm so sick of the adopted princess getting all the glory while I'm treated like chopped liver in my own family. They asked me why I can't be more like Emma. More like Emma. She's not even their real daughter, but somehow she's the golden child. I hate this. I swear when I get married, I'm not inviting her. Let her see how it feels to be excluded for once. Maybe then Mom and Dad will remember who their actual daughter is. The last message hit me like a physical blow, like this wasn't a spontaneous decision made during wedding stress. This was a calculated plan she'd been nurturing for years. I screenshot the messages and sent them to myself, adding them to my growing evidence folder. Kevin watched me work with a mixture of sympathy and admiration. "What are you going to do with all this?" he asked. "I don't know yet, but I'm done being gaslit. I'm done being told I'm oversensitive when I have proof that this exclusion was premeditated. I'm done funding my own rejection." That night, I went through my financial records one more time, but this time I was looking for something specific. Recurring payments that I could stop. The family phone plan that I'd taken over 2 years ago, the streaming services I'd added everyone to, the insurance policy on Dad's workshop that somehow ended up being my responsibility. But there was something bigger, something I'd forgotten about in my eagerness to be the helpful daughter. 3 years ago, when Dad's business was struggling, I'd co-signed on a business loan to help him expand. $50,000 that had allowed him to buy new equipment and hire additional staff. The business had recovered, but the loan was still in both our names, and I was still legally responsible for it. More importantly, I'd never been removed as a beneficiary on several family accounts. The business checking account, the savings account Mom and Dad had set up for emergencies, even Sarah's credit cards, which I'd co-signed for when she was building credit in college. I had access to everything. And more importantly, I had the legal right to withdraw my support from anything I'd co-signed or guaranteed. For the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. The next morning, I called my bank and began the process of removing myself from every shared account, every co-signed loan, every financial entanglement that bound me to a family that had decided I wasn't worthy of basic inclusion. But I didn't stop there. I called every service provider and canceled every account that I'd been paying for the family. The cell phone plan, the Netflix, Hulu, and Disney Plus subscriptions, the family iCloud storage, the roadside assistance coverage. Each cancellation felt like cutting a rope that had been binding me to people who saw me as a resource rather than a daughter. The business loan was more complicated, but my lawyer, yes, I called a lawyer, explained that while I couldn't remove myself from the existing loan, I could demand immediate repayment of my portion since the business was now profitable enough to handle it. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked. "It sounds like this is going to create significant family drama." "They created the drama when they decided I wasn't family enough for a wedding invitation," I replied. "I'm just responding to their decision with appropriate boundaries." The first sign that my actions were having an impact came 2 days later. Dad called, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Emma, we need to talk. The bank called about the business loan. They said you're demanding immediate repayment?" "That's correct." "Sweetheart, you know we don't have $50,000 lying around. The business is doing well, but we've got cash flow tied up in inventory and equipment." Then you'll need to figure something out. Maybe ask your real daughter for help. There was a long silence. Then Dad's voice changed, becoming the disappointed tone he'd used when I was a child and had failed to meet expectations. Emma, this isn't like you. You're being vindictive and petty. This is about money, not family. You're absolutely right, Dad. This is about money. It's about the $90,000 I've given this family over the past 3 years. It's about funding my own exclusion. It's about being treated like an ATM instead of a daughter. $90,000? Emma, that's ridiculous. We never asked you for $90,000. I was ready for this. I'd prepared for exactly this conversation. Would you like me to email you the spreadsheet? Because I have documentation for every payment, every loan, every expense I've covered for this family that apparently doesn't consider me family enough for a wedding invitation. Another long silence. Then, Emma, you're taking this wedding thing too far. Sarah was just stressed. She didn't mean anything personal by it. Dad, she told her ex-boyfriend 3 years ago that she planned to exclude me from her wedding. This wasn't stress. This was premeditated. And if I'm not family enough for her wedding, then I'm not family enough to subsidize your lives anymore. The call ended with Dad promising we'd work something out and asking me to be reasonable. But his voice had lost its confident edge. For the first time in my life, I held the power in our relationship. That power was about to become very public. Sarah's rehearsal dinner was scheduled for Friday night at Romano's, the upscale Italian restaurant where our family had celebrated every major milestone for the past decade. The same restaurant where they'd celebrated my college graduation, my first job promotion, my 25th birthday. The restaurant where I'd always felt like I belonged. I wasn't invited to the rehearsal dinner, of course, but I knew the schedule, knew the timeline, knew exactly when the whole extended family would be gathered in one place to celebrate Sarah's upcoming marriage. The marriage I was too adopted to witness. I spent Friday afternoon getting ready with the same care Sarah had probably taken getting ready for her bachelorette party. I chose a black dress that was elegant but not attention-seeking, did my makeup carefully, and put on the silver bracelet that had started this whole journey. Then I drove to Romano's. The private dining room was exactly as I remembered. Warm lighting, long tables arranged in a U-shape. The family photos Sarah had insisted on displaying throughout the space. Photos that told the story of her life, her achievements, her milestones. Photos that included me in the background of family shots, but never as the focus. I stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in the scene. Mom and Dad at the head table, with Sarah and her fiancé, Brad. Aunts and uncles I'd called family for 22 years. Cousins who'd grown up with me, who'd never questioned my place at family gatherings. Until now. Sarah saw me first. Her face went white, then red with anger. "What are you doing here? You weren't invited." The conversation around the room stopped. Every head turned toward me, and I could see the confusion on their faces. Aunt Maria looked between Sarah and me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Uncle Tom actually stood up as if to welcome me. "I know I wasn't invited," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. Because apparently, after 22 years, I'm still not family enough for family events. "Emma," Mom's voice was warning, pleading. "This isn't the time or place. Actually, this is exactly the time and place. Because this is where our family gathers. This is where we celebrate the people we love. This is where I learned what family was supposed to feel like." I pulled the silver bracelet from my purse, holding it up so everyone could see it. "This is the bracelet you gave me on my first day home. You said it was so I'd never forget that I was your daughter. Forever and always." I could see tears starting in Mom's eyes, but I wasn't done. But apparently forever and always has conditions. Apparently being your daughter for 22 years isn't enough to earn me a seat at my sister's wedding. Apparently giving this family $90,000 over the past 3 years isn't enough to be considered real family. Aunt Maria gasped. $90,000? "Oh yes. Would you like to see the spreadsheet?" I pulled out my phone and the screen displayed the financial summary I'd prepared. Sarah's college tuition, the down payment on her house, family vacations, emergency expenses, car repairs, medical bills. I've been funding this family for years, and my reward is being told I'm not authentic enough for Sarah's big day. Sarah stood up, her face blazing with anger and embarrassment. You're being ridiculous and dramatic. Nobody forced you to pay for anything. You offered. You're right, I did offer. Because I was desperate to prove I belonged here, because I spent 22 years trying to earn a place that I thought was already mine. I turned to address the room, making eye contact with relatives who'd known me since I was 6 years old. But here's what you didn't know. Here's what Sarah didn't want you to know. She's been planning this exclusion for years. I pulled up Kevin's screenshots on my phone and read Sarah's messages aloud. The room was dead silent as I shared her texts about the adopted princess and her plans to exclude me from her wedding to show Mom and Dad who their actual daughter is. Uncle Tom sat down heavily, looking like he'd been punched. Aunt Maria was crying openly now. Even Brad, Sarah's fiancé, was staring at his bride-to-be with an expression I couldn't quite read. Sarah, Aunt Maria's voice was shaking. How could you say those things? Emma is your sister. She's not my sister, Sarah exploded. She's my parents' charity case who never learned her place. She's been competing with me for their attention my entire life, and I'm sick of pretending she belongs here. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Dad, who'd been trying to signal me to stop this entire time, looked stunned by Sarah's vehemence. But I wasn't finished. I had one more piece of evidence, one more truth bomb that would complete the picture. There's something else you should know, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Mrs. Rodriguez, my high school guidance counselor, had some interesting things to share about conversations she had with both Sarah and my parents over the years. I looked directly at Mom and Dad. Apparently, you used to brag about me constantly, about how responsible I was, how I was everything you hoped for in a daughter, about how I was more dependable than your biological daughter. Mom's face crumpled. Emma, we never meant. And Sarah knew. She was jealous of me from the beginning. Jealous of the attention you gave me, jealous of my achievements, jealous that you seemed proud of the adopted daughter who appreciated what she had. I turned back to Sarah. So this isn't about wedding space, or guest lists, or authenticity. This is about a 28-year-old woman who's still jealous of her little sister and finally found a way to hurt me the way she's always wanted to. Sarah's face was purple with rage. You have no right to be here. This is my rehearsal dinner, my wedding, my family. You're absolutely right, I said, and for the first time since I'd walked into the room, I smiled. This is your family, and I'm finally understanding that I was never really part of it. I was just the grateful adopted daughter who paid the bills and stayed quiet when she was disrespected. I placed the silver bracelet on the table in front of Mom and Dad. Forever and always, right? Except when it matters. Then I turned to address the room one final time. I want you all to know that I'm done. I'm done paying for a family that doesn't want me. I'm done trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. I'm done being grateful for scraps from people who see me as a second-class family member. I started to leave, then turned back one more time. Oh, and Sarah? The $50,000 business loan I co-signed for Dad? I've demanded immediate repayment. The cell phone plan you're all on? Canceled. The streaming services? Gone. The insurance policies I've been paying? Dropped. The savings account I've been contributing to? Frozen. Dad stood up, his face panicked. Emma, you can't. I absolutely can. Because if I'm not family enough for your daughter's wedding, then I'm not family enough to subsidize your lives. Good luck funding your own family events from now on. As I walked out of Romano's, I could hear the explosion of voices behind me. Angry voices, confused voices, voices demanding explanations, and voices offering apologies that were 22 years too late. But for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't staying to manage their emotions or fix their problems. I wasn't apologizing for taking up space or defending my right to be treated with basic respect. I was walking away from people who had taught me that love was conditional, that family was something you had to earn, that gratitude was a debt that could never be fully repaid. But I was walking toward something too. Toward the understanding that family isn't about blood or adoption papers or shared DNA. It's about people who choose you, who celebrate you, who include you, not because you're useful, but because you're valued. I was walking toward the realization that I'd spent 22 years in the wrong family, but that didn't mean I was destined to be alone. I was walking toward the life I'd been too afraid to claim while I was busy being grateful for scraps. And for the first time since that terrible Tuesday dinner, I felt free.